Recently, I completed my first ever playthrough of Elden Ring, including the DLC. Whenever I play a new Souls game, I always ensure to pick up every item and read every item description throughout my first run. This video mainly serves as an excuse for me to discuss Elden Ring's lore in broad strokes by focusing on a few key item descriptions, discussing what I enjoy about them so much, and how they affected either my understanding of the overall lore and story, or deepened my emotional connection to the game. To keep this video from feeling too repetitive, and to cover a wider range of lore topics, I've limited myself to one item per category, with the exception of consumables and key items, as their usages are wildly varied compared to weapons, incantations, sorceries, and so on. I'm also going to assume that you have general knowledge of Elden Ring's story, but I will try to provide context for those unfamiliar with it. Naturally, this video will contain full spoilers for both the base game and DLC, so if that's something you're sensitive to, then it might be best to come back to this video later. With that all out of the way, let's get started with our first item description. Remembrance of the Omen King. Remembrance of Morgott, the Omen King, hewn into the Erdtree. The power of its namesake can be unlocked by the Finger Reader. Alternatively, it can be used to gain a great bounty of runes. Though born one of the graceless Omen, Morgott took it upon himself to become the Erdtree's protector. He loved not in return, for he was never loved, but nevertheless, love it he did. Morgott is one of my favorite demigods in Elden Ring, and I feel as if this item description succinctly explains the tragedy of his tale. He was born an Omen, a being exhibiting various traits of the primordial crucible, such as horns and a tail. Under the law of the Golden Order established by Queen Marika, Omens are cursed to never receive the blessings of grace, and thus will never attain immortality. This exclusion of the Omen likely stems from Marika's past trauma of having survived the massacre of her village by a people called the Hornsent, who similarly have horns. Having not one, but two Omen children surely must have horrified her. Morgott is someone with a big heart and plenty of love to share, and yet that love is one-sided. During the Shattering, he remained the Erdtree's sole protector, even if its very existence symbolized the oppression of his people. It serves as a stark contrast between him and his brother Mohg, who rejected the Erdtree entirely in favor of establishing his own dynasty. Love can and often is irrational, and Morgott's love is no exception. Blessing of Marika. A special physic blessed by Marika, the Queen of the Erdtree, completely restores HP and heals all ailments. Marika once created several of these physics for Messmer's sake, but never again. Shadow of the Erdtree introduced various new characters and events which were never mentioned in the base game, buried under charred corpses and ashen remains in the realm of Shadow. As I explored the Gravesite plane at the beginning of the DLC, I found various items and ghosts mentioning Messmer by name. The Blessing of Marika's item description stuck with me the most. The line, "but never again," cuts deep, like a knife being plunged straight into my heart. I have to wonder if this is an intentional writing decision, placing us in the shoes of Messmer, Marika's abandoned child, who led the crusade against the Hornsent. Marika was swift to betray Messmer, withdrawing all support and leaving him alone within the realm of Shadow to carry out his sole duty. While I didn't have the full story at the time, this one simple item description made one thing certain to me: that Messmer's resentment was targeted at his mother. She had forsaken him, using him for her own vengeance before casting him away like a tool. This doesn't mean that Messmer is entirely innocent, of course. He is still very much a genocidal tyrant, and yet I can't help but sympathize a little bit with him. After all, how could Mesmer disobey his own mother, the ruling god of the lands between, when she had shown him nothing but kindness up until the betrayal? Order Healing. One of the incantations of the Golden Order fundamentalists, used by hunters of those who live in death, alleviates death blight buildup. The noble Goldmask lamented what had become of the hunters. How easy it is for learning and learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics. All the good and the great wanted, in their foolishness, was an absolute evil to contend with. Does such a notion exist in the fundamentals of order? Goldmask is one of the Tarnished introduced in the game's opening cutscene, and whose questline leads directly into the Age of Order ending. For such an important character who studies and explores the depths of the Golden Order, we never hear any vocalizations from him, leading to him being this mysterious existence whose exact philosophy can be difficult to decipher. Order Healing's description provides us with an incredibly insightful peek into Goldmask's worldview, particularly how he views the hunters of those who live in death. He sees that the Golden Order has strayed significantly from its core theory, its founding notions largely ignored in place of unchanging blind faith. It feels relevant to our own world and how those who otherwise might have been good people are reduced to mere propaganda puppets when given a straw man by an authoritative figure. While I personally don't believe that the Golden Order was ever perfect or even a good thing for the lands between, Goldmask's observations of the world around him and eventual attempt to perfect its numerous flaws are certainly admirable. Golden Braid. A braid of golden hair, cut loose. Queen Marika's offering to the Grandmother. Boosts holy damage negation by the utmost. What was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There is no one left to answer, and Marika never returned home again. In my mind, the Shaman village is where the story of Elden Ring truly begins. The tragedy that would scar Marika for life and influence her entire being is an essential aspect of the game's narrative, and the two items found in the village manage to convey so much weight with so few words. Marika's last visit to the village of her birth would mark the point in which Marika the Shaman would abandon almost everything to become the queen we know her as throughout the events of the game. While the description doesn't explicitly state what Marika was feeling at the time, from her actions throughout the rest of the story, it's possible to piece together numerous interpretations. The Crusade in the Lands of Shadow could convey her bitter resentment, and the birth of her countless children could be symbolic of her desire to have another family and protect them with her kindness. That being said, while we can make guesses as to what Marika was thinking and feeling throughout the choices she made during her rule, her true feelings would only be known by the Grandmother. It's because we, the player, were never present for any of these events that Marika and the mysteries surrounding her are all so interesting to discuss and theorize, and why she is by far one of From Software's best-written characters. Prattling Pate, You're Beautiful. Twisted clay sculpt in the shape of a demi-human head emits a voice that says, "You're beautiful." A wistful fetish that imparts voices and words on an eternal journey. Unconditional love, unrestrained assurance. It must have been a mother speaking. Motherhood is a core theme that runs throughout Elden Ring. How one's circumstances of birth and formative years can deeply impact the rest of their life is something explored in the stories of many characters. Bok the Seamster is likely to be one of the first few NPCs a player encounters during their trip around Limgrave, and his relationship to his mother is frequently highlighted in discussions with the character. In order to get Bok's best possible ending, the player needs to obtain the You're Beautiful Prattling Pate and use it near him to break him out of his depressive spiral. It's his own mother who inspires him to become a seamster, and it's his mother's voice who eventually saves him when he's at his lowest. In a game filled with numerous tragedies, the sweet story of a son who holds his mother so close to his heart is a breath of fresh air and serves as a wonderful parallel to Marika and the treatment of some of her children, such as Mesmer, which we discussed before. Cursemark of Death. Cursemark carved into the discarded flesh of Ranni the Witch, also known as the half-wheel wound of the centipede. This cursemark was carved at the moment of death of the first demigod, and should have taken the shape of a circle. However, 2 demigods perished at the same time, breaking the cursemark into 2 half-wheels. Ranni was the first of the demigods whose flesh perished, while the Prince of Death perished in soul alone. The Night of the Black Knives occurs before the events of the game begin, and are told to the player during the game's opening cutscene. Godwyn the Golden, one of Marika's dear children, was assassinated by a group of Numen women, brandishing knives embedded with the power of the Rune of Death. This was the first ever instance in history of a demigod dying, and the player spends a significant portion of time learning about the night and the one responsible for orchestrating it, Ranni the Witch. This item description is essential to understanding Ranni's plan. She would murder Godwyn in soul and herself in flesh at the same time, so that she could move her soul to a dull vessel and escape the influence of the Greater Will, the outer god responsible for the creation of the Elden Ring and the omnipotent observer of the lands between. Godwyn's death not only broke Marika's heart, but it would lead to the birth of those who live in death across the lands, skeletal remains reanimated through the corruption of the death root. It cannot be understated just how important the Cursemark of Death is to understanding why the world takes its current shape. Marika's Hammer. Stone hammer made in the lands of the Numen, outside the lands between. The tool with which Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, and Radagon attempted to repair it. The hammer partially broke upon shattering the ring, becoming splintered with rune fragments. Admittedly, I don't have too much to say about this description, but just like the Blessing of Marika and the Golden Braid which we went over before, Marika's hammer provides us with a deeper look into Marika as a character and her counterpart, Radagon. Marika's hammer perfectly encapsulates the kindness of Marika and the rationality of Radagon's order blended together. In the game's opening cutscene, we can actually see Marika breaking the Elden Ring and Radagon's effort to fix it as well. It's a neat detail which I and many others may have overlooked during our first playthroughs, but it's easily noticeable when you look for it. Eternal Darkness. Forbidden sorcery of Celia, Town of Sorcery. Creates a space of darkness that draws in sorceries and incantations. This sorcery can be cast while in motion. Originally a lost sorcery of the Eternal City, the despair that brought about its ruin made manifest. The destruction of the Eternal City at the hands of Estelle, one of the Greater Will's children, was a planned attack in divine retribution for the Numen's attempts to sever the Greater Will's influence from the lands between using the Fingerslayer blade. While it would make more sense for me to discuss the item description of the Fingerslayer blade itself, I did want to recognize how Eternal Darkness also makes reference to these events, albeit with less detail. Unless the player misses this sorcery during their first trip to Caelid, then this will be one of the first opportunities the player has to learn about the destruction of the Eternal City. Not only that, but the Eternal City soon becomes very relevant to completing Ranni's questline and obtaining her ending, and so I felt as if this description deserved a brief mention in this video. Cleanrot Knight Finlay Ashes. Legendary Ashen Remains. Used to summon the spirit of the Cleanrot Knight Finlay. Finlay was one of the few survivors of the Battle of Ionia, who, in an unimaginable act of heroism, carried the slumbering demigod Malenia all the way back to the Haligtree. She managed the feat alone, fending off all manner of foes along the way. Spirit Ashes are a gameplay mechanic that I adore in Elden Ring, even if I personally don't use them. Not only do they allow you to fight alongside various creatures and former enemies from the lands between, but their item descriptions give insight into the abundant side stories in the world. While there are plenty of great choices to discuss, Cleanrot Knight Finlay is one of my favorite minor characters, not only for the feat that she managed to achieve, but for how her story ties into one of the game's most iconic characters and boss fights, Malenia. Without Finlay's efforts, Malenia would not have returned to the Haligtree after her confrontation with Radahn, and the infamous boss fight that we all know wouldn't have been able to occur without her selfless act of bravery. Young Lion's Helm. The golden helm worn by Radahn in his younger years. Proudly displaying his heroic red hair, it is fitting attire for a lion. When Malenia, blade of Miquella, let the rotflower blossom in Aeonia, Radahn heard a murmur in his ear. Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort. Despite the Battle of Aeonia being one of the largest and most deadly conflicts during the Shattering, the precise details of what drama unfolded between Malenia and Radahn are kept rather vague. The young lion's armor set, obtained after defeating promised consort Radahn, gives us a major hint as to Malenia's intentions for confronting the red-haired lion general. Whether Radahn actually consented to becoming Miquella's consort is another discussion entirely that I won't delve into for this video, so instead I want to highlight some ways in which this item description can be interpreted. Assuming that the pairing is consensual, Malenia's words serve as a reminder to Radahn to fulfill his vow, to survive Malenia's blossom and to seek Miquella in the realm of shadow. If the pairing isn't consensual, then Malenia's words can be read as her dooming Radahn to a shackled fate, one where he is utilized as a mere tool for Miquella's ascension and the birth of an age of compassion. There's just so much to take away from this single item description for lore enthusiasts. And that's all I've got for this video. Sorry that this one took so long to come out. I've never done a video of this type of format before, and I've never done a lore video at all. But if you enjoyed it, feel free to let me know, and I might do another in the future. Do you have any favorite or notable item descriptions from Elden Ring or even from Night Rain? Please let me know in the comments down below, and have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the world. Until next time, take care.